On a busy street corner, the sound of a mother's desperate voice echoed through the air. She was standing there, pouring her heart into every note, singing to raise money for her sick son. Her child, who looked exhausted, was nestled in her arms, his small head resting against her shoulder. She didn't realize that Snoop Dogg, the famous rapper, had stopped his pink Cadillac to hear the song, and his presence was about to change everything. Inside the children's hospital, Emma Blake sat in a brightly lit consultation room. Her 3-year-old son, Leo, was sitting quietly on her lap. The walls, painted with colorful animal decals, seemed to mock the seriousness of the situation. Leo, unaware of the tension in the room, played quietly with a worn teddy bear, the fur matted from countless nights of comfort. Dr. Olivia Matthews, a specialist pediatric oncologist with kind eyes and graying hair, sat across from them. Her desk was covered with an array of scan results and medical charts, each one telling part of Leo's story. As she began to speak, her voice carried both authority and genuine compassion. She looked at Emma and said gently, "I'm sorry, Emma. The results from Leo's latest test show something very serious. He has stage 4 neuroblastoma." Emma's grip on Leo tightened as she heard those words, stage 4. Her heart raced as she struggled to process the information. Stage 4, she repeated softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Carter nodded slowly, her expression solemn. "Yes. The cancer has spread from his adrenal gland to part of his left kidney." She reached for one of the scans on her desk, holding it up to the light. "If you look here," she said, pointing to various areas on the image, "you can see how the disease has spread." Emma leaned forward, her eyes straining to make sense of the grainy black and white image. To her untrained eye, it looked like a confusing mess of shadows and shapes. But to Dr. Carter, it was a map, a clear picture of her son's illness. "What does this mean for Leo?" Emma asked, her voice trembling. "How long does he have?" She couldn't finish the question. She couldn't bring herself to say the words. Dr. Carter's expression softened as she looked at her sympathetically. "I want to be honest with you, Emma. Without aggressive treatment, Leo may only have 6 months, possibly up to a year at best." The words hit Emma like a physical blow. Her heart sank, and she instinctively pulled Leo closer as if she could shield him from the harsh reality with her embrace. The little boy, sensing his mother's distress, looked up at her with wide, innocent eyes. "Mama?" he asked softly, his small voice cutting through the heavy silence that had fallen over the room. Emma forced a smile, running her hand over Leo's bald head. "It's okay, sweetie," she whispered, though she felt anything but okay. Dr. Carter leaned forward slightly. "However, I want to emphasize that with the right treatment, surgery, immunotherapy, many children can achieve remission or prolonged survival. We've seen remarkable progress in these treatments in recent years." Emma nodded, clinging to this glimmer of hope. "When can we start?" she asked, eager to do whatever she could to save her son. But Dr. Carter's expression shifted slightly, concern creeping into her features. "Emma, we've had these consultations before. I need to ask, what's stopping you from moving forward with Leo's treatment?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unavoidable. Emma's composure, which she had been desperately trying to maintain, finally cracked. Tears welled up in her eyes as she tried to explain. "Our insurance," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "It only covers basic chemotherapy, consultations, and diagnostic tests. I can't, afford the recommended surgery and immunotherapy." The absence of her late husband weighed heavily on her in that moment. If he were still alive, maybe they could have managed. But as a single mother, working multiple jobs just to keep a roof over their heads, the cost of advanced cancer treatment seemed insurmountable. Dr. Carter nodded with understanding, her eyes filled with sympathy. "I see. I'm so sorry, Emma. I know how difficult this must be for you." She paused, considering her next words carefully. "We'll continue with the basic chemotherapy to give Leo the best chance possible under these circumstances. And I promise you we'll explore every option available to us." Emma nodded, grateful for the doctor's compassion, but feeling utterly helpless in the face of her son's illness, and the financial barriers standing in the way of his treatment. As the consultation drew to a close, Dr. Carter stood and walked around her desk, placing a comforting hand on Emma's shoulder. "We're not giving up, Emma. Leo is a fighter and we'll be fighting right alongside him." Emma looked up at the doctor, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she managed to say, her voice barely audible. They left the consultation room and Emma held Leo's hand. His small body felt more fragile than ever. The colorful animal decals on the walls now seemed to blur together. A fake, cheerful facade in a world that had suddenly become very dark and uncertain. The bright white lights of the hospital corridor gave way to the softer glow of the billing counter. Emma, with Leo still in her arms, approached the desk. A middle-aged woman with a kind face looked up as they arrived. "Hello, Mrs. Taylor," she greeted, recognizing them from their frequent visits. "How can I help you today?" Emma shifted Leo to her hip, freeing one hand to reach for her wallet. "I need to settle today's bill, please," she said quietly, still shaken from the emotional consultation. The clerk nodded and turned to her computer. Her fingers flew over the keyboard as she pulled up the charges. After a moment, she looked back at Emma. "The total for today's consultation, imaging, and chemotherapy session comes to $5,500. Emma's heart sank at the figure, even though she had been expecting it. Wordlessly, she handed over her insurance card, praying silently that there wouldn't be any issues with the coverage. The clerk processed the card, her eyes scanning the screen. After what felt like an eternity to Emma, she smiled. "Good news, Mrs. Taylor. Today's treatment is fully covered by your insurance." A small wave of relief washed over Emma, but it did little to ease the overall burden of their situation. She knew that this basic coverage, while helpful, fell far short of what Leo truly needed. "Thank you," Emma said, managing a weak smile as she took back her insurance card. As they left the billing counter, Emma felt the weight of their financial reality pressing down on her. The relief of having today's treatment covered was overshadowed by the knowledge that the life-saving treatments Leo needed still remained far out of reach. They made their way through the hospital's sliding doors and into the parking lot. The afternoon sun beat down on them, a stark contrast to the air-conditioned interior of the hospital. Emma walked with Leo toward their old, weathered van. Its faded paint and rust spots were a testament to years of use and minimal maintenance. Opening the side door, Emma carefully placed Leo into his car seat. It was a salvaged seat, one they had acquired secondhand after their original one had been damaged in a minor accident. The broken seat belt was a painful reminder of their financial struggles, a small repair that had to be postponed in favor of more urgent needs. As she secured Leo into the seat using a makeshift strap, Emma felt a wave of maternal guilt wash over her. She knew the seat wasn't ideal, but it was the best she could manage given their circumstances. Closing the door, Emma made her way to the driver's seat. As she sat behind the wheel, Dr. Carter's words echoed in her mind, the desperate need for treatments they couldn't afford, the ticking clock on Leo's life without proper intervention. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles turning white as she fought back a fresh wave of tears. Starting the engine, which sputtered to life after a few tries, Emma pulled out of the hospital parking lot. As they drove through the city streets, her mind raced with calculations and possibilities. She thought about the money she had managed to save so far from her street performances. But it was barely a drop in the ocean compared to what they needed. The streets blurred past as Emma headed toward her usual spot to perform. Her thoughts were a whirlwind of worry and determination. Somewhere in this city, there had to be a way to save her son. She just had to find it. As they drove, Leo's quiet voice came from the back seat. "Mama, sing?" Emma glanced in the rearview mirror, meeting her son's wide eyes. Despite everything, she managed to smile. "Of course, sweetie. What song do you want to hear?" "Twinkle Star," Leo replied, his face lighting up. So, as they made their way through the bustling city, Emma's voice filled the old van, singing Twinkle, Twinkle Little Star for her son. In that moment, she made a silent promise to herself and to Leo. She would find a way to give him the treatment he needed, no matter what it took. The song might be about stars, but for Emma, Leo was her entire universe, and she would move heaven and earth to keep him shining. The van came to a halt along a moderately busy shopping street on a Monday afternoon. Emma parked in the same spot she had used for months. The sidewalks were quieter than usual, a stark contrast to the bustling activity of the weekend. Emma took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. "Okay, Leo," she said, turning to her son in the back seat. "Mommy's going to sing for a while. You can nap if you want, or look at your book, okay?" Leo nodded, already reaching for the tattered picture book that had become his constant companion during these performances. But he yawned at the same time. Emma smiled at him, her heart swelling with love and determination. She stepped out of the van and made her way to the back, opening the doors to reveal her small performance setup, a worn microphone, a battery-powered speaker, and a cardboard sign that read "Help My Son." Her signs had once been more polished, but the rain and wear had ruined them. She quickly rearranged everything and placed her earnings box in front. She glanced up at the passing shoppers, some curious, others indifferent, but Emma kept her focus steady. She took a deep breath, plugged in her microphone, and began to sing. Her voice rang out, filling the space around her, clear, emotional, raw. People began to slow down, curious, some pausing to listen. Coins and bills started to drop into her collection box, but Emma knew it wasn't enough. It was never enough. She glanced at the small pile of money after her first song, counting $43. It wasn't close to what they needed. As she took a short break, Emma returned to the van, where Leo was still resting, his small body curled up. She glanced at the money once more, her shoulders slumping in defeat. Maybe another song, she murmured to herself, wiping away tears. Then something unexpected happened. A pink Cadillac slowly drove past, and instead of continuing on, it slowed down, pulling over just a few feet away. Emma's head lifted as she saw the driver. None other than Snoop Dogg himself, the famous rapper. At first, she thought it might be coincidence. But as he stepped out of the car, his tall frame and sunglasses unmistakable, Emma felt a strange mix of nerves and disbelief. Snoop Dogg, hands in his pockets, listened intently as Emma continued to sing. By the time she finished, he was standing right there, a few feet away, his eyes on her with genuine interest. "Hey," he said casually, his voice calm but commanding. "You got a powerful voice." Emma blinked, unsure if she was hearing him correctly. "Thank you," she stammered, surprised at how steady she managed to sound. "I've been listening for a minute," he continued. "You out here singing for your boy. I respect that." Emma's eyes filled with tears. She tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. Snoop Dogg, one of the biggest names in the world, had stopped to listen to her. "I gotta help," Snoop said, pulling out his phone. "Let me see what I can do for you." For Emma, it felt like hope had just walked up to her on the street corner. After Emma finished singing, there was a moment of hushed silence. The small crowd stood still, taking in the emotion she had poured into her song. Then suddenly people began to erupt into applause. It wasn't just polite clapping. It was loud, genuine, filled with admiration and appreciation. Some people began approaching her, dropping money into her collection box, while others smiled and offered words of encouragement. Emma stood there, a little overwhelmed by the sudden attention, a sense of warmth spreading through her heart. She had been singing on the streets for months, hoping to raise enough money to cover Leo's treatments. But tonight felt different. This wasn't just about the coins in her collection box. It felt like people truly cared. It was only after the crowd had started to disperse, moving on with their day, that Emma noticed movement from a nearby Cadillac parked a little ways down the street. The car door opened and a man stepped out. He was dressed sharply in a blue shirt and blazer. There was something commanding about him even before Emma realized who he was. Her eyes widened in shock as recognition hit her. Standing just a few feet away, watching her intently, was none other than Snoop Dogg, the rapper she had seen on TV countless times. He removed his sunglasses, revealing eyes that glistened slightly with unshed tears. His face, usually covered in smiles and swagger, wore a serious expression, completely different from what she had expected. Emma felt rooted to the spot, unable to move, unable to speak. Snoop walked over slowly, his presence calming but powerful. "That was beautiful," he said softly, his voice low and filled with emotion. "That song means a lot to me. It reminds me of a close friend I lost to cancer." Emma could only nod, too stunned to form words. She kept clutching Leo closer to her chest, still trying to process what was happening. Snoop's gaze shifted to Leo, taking in the boy's thin appearance, his bald head. It was clear he had noticed. Slowly, understanding dawned in his eyes. He recognized the signs. "Your son?" he asked gently. Emma, still trying to hold back tears, nodded again. "Yes, this is Leo." Snoop's expression softened further as he smiled at Leo. Then, turning back to Emma, he said gently, "Mind if we talk for a bit?" Emma, still processing the surreal moment, managed to nod. "Of course," she whispered, her voice still shaky. Snoop patted his pockets, looking mildly frustrated. "Hold on a sec," he muttered. "I think I left my checkbook in the car." As Snoop turned to walk back to his Cadillac, a sharp voice suddenly broke through the air. "You need to stop pretending your son is sick to get people's sympathy." A woman's voice cut through the murmurs of the crowd. She was pushing her way through the onlookers, her face twisted with anger and disgust. Her finger pointed at Emma, shaking as she spoke. "Let him grow some hair and then we'll know he's fine and healthy." Her words were cruel, dripping with sarcasm, mocking Emma. Emma's cheeks burned with a mix of anger and humiliation. She clutched Leo even tighter, moving closer to the edge of the crowd, her fists clenched. The cruel words reverberated through the street, drawing uncomfortable stares from the few passers-by. She opened her mouth to defend herself, but no words came out. Snoop, who had paused midway to his car at the sound of the commotion, turned back. His normally laid-back demeanor had hardened. His eyes narrowed, and his voice gained a sharp edge beneath its smoothness. "Excuse me," he said, his tone commanding yet calm. "Do you have any idea what you're talking about?" The woman, realizing it was Snoop Dogg speaking to her, faltered for a moment before quickly recovering her bravado. "I'm Jasmine," she said, her tone switching from aggressive to fawning in an instant. "Oh my gosh. Can I get a picture with you?" Snoop's expression remained firm, unbothered by her sudden change in behavior. "Your name sounds like a singer's name," he said coolly. "If you can sing better than her," he gestured toward Emma, "and apologize for being cruel, then I'll consider taking a picture with you." Jasmine looked taken aback. I can't sing," she stammered, "but maybe I could if you trained me." Snoop shook his head. "People who are proud and mean are not my fans, and I do not support your judgmental behavior toward Emma." He turned to Emma. "Is your name right?" "Yes," Emma confirmed softly, still clutching Leo close to her. Snoop's eyes narrowed slightly. "I think Emma has real talent. I want to support her." Jasmine, feeling embarrassed now, opened her mouth as if to say something more, but Snoop's stern gaze silenced her. Without another word, she turned and disappeared down the street. As the tension began to lift, Snoop turned back to Emma. His expression softened. "I'm sorry about that," he said genuinely. "Some people just don't understand." Emma, still feeling a mix of shock and disbelief, managed a small smile. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You didn't have to do that." Snoop shook his head. "No, I did have to do that. Nobody deserves to be treated that way, especially not when they're already going through so much." His voice softened even more as he looked between Emma and Leo. "Listen," he said, "I'd really like to hear your story if you're willing to share it." Emma hesitated for a moment. She had kept everything bottled up for so long, carrying this burden alone. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to open up. With Leo still in her arms, she began to tell him everything. Snoop listened intently, his brow furrowed in concern. His laid-back persona faded into genuine care as he took in Emma's story. "This is Leo," Emma started gently, stroking her son's head. "He's 3 years old and he has stage 4 neuroblastoma." Her voice cracked slightly as she spoke. The reality of her situation hit her hard as she said it out loud. Snoop's eyes widened slightly, a flash of pain crossing his face. "I'm so sorry," he said softly. "That's a tough battle for anyone, let alone a little one." Emma nodded, swallowing hard before continuing. "We found out a few months ago. The cancer started in his adrenal gland, but it has spread to his left kidney. Our insurance only covers basic chemotherapy and diagnostic tests, but what Leo really needs is surgery to remove the cancer cells from his adrenal gland, followed by immunotherapy." She looked down at Leo, who was quietly playing with the collar of her shirt, blissfully unaware of the conversation. "I've been singing, begging, on the streets for months, hoping to raise enough for his treatment. People have been generous. More than I could ever thank them for. But it's just not enough. Not for the full treatment and ongoing care." Snoop listened carefully, his expression one of growing concern. "And the doctors? What do they say about his chances?" Emma's eyes welled up with tears. "Without the full treatment, they say he might only have 6 months to a year." She quickly wiped her eyes, not wanting Leo to see her cry. But the doctor's words stung deeply. "With the right treatment, though, there's hope. Real hope. I can't afford it." Snoop nodded slowly, his brow furrowed even more. "And what about your van? Do you have his hospital records in there?" Emma's voice caught in her throat. She quickly opened her van door, retrieving the paperwork from inside. She held them out, almost offering proof to him. "Some people think I'm faking, but I would never do that. I could show you everything, the scans, the bills." Snoop held up a hand, stopping her gently. Hey, you don't need to prove anything to me. I believe you." Emma's heart skipped a beat. Believed? Someone famous believed her? It felt like she was dreaming. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a checkbook. Emma's heart raced. Hold on, she thought. This might be it. Finally, some real help. But then, to her surprise and dismay, Snoop tore the check in half. Emma blinked in confusion. "I'm sorry," she stammered. "Did I do something wrong?" Snoop smiled, his eyes determined. No. I'm tearing this up because I want to help you in more ways than just a written check can ever do." Emma's confusion deepened. "What do you mean?" Snoop's smile widened. "I see more than just a mother in need here. I see real talent. Talent that deserves bigger exposure. His eyes lit up. I have an idea. But first I need to make a quick call. Will you wait here for me? Still stunned, Emma could only nod. She watched as Snoop walked back to his Cadillac, phone in hand, his expression focused. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few minutes, Snoop returned, a wide grin on his face. Okay, he said, clapping his hands together. I need you to keep singing. Can you do that for me? Emma, still bewildered, managed to nod. Of course. Great. Snoop replied. I'll be right back. With that, he climbed into his Cadillac and drove off, leaving Emma standing there, wondering if the last few minutes had been some kind of dream. Taking a deep breath, Emma gently placed Leo back in his car seat, making sure he was comfortable. Then, with a mix of uncertainty and hope, she walked back to her microphone. Once more she began to sing. Her voice filled the air, amplified by the professional equipment she had never used before. As she sang, she couldn't help but wonder what Snoop had planned. And would it really change things for her and Leo? She had just finished her fifth song when she heard the unmistakable rumble of a vehicle approaching. To her amazement, it wasn't just Snoop returning. Behind him was a van, loaded with professional sound equipment. Snoop stepped out of his car, his usual wide grin on his face. He was followed by several people. Some she recognized as his security team, others as part of a production crew. They immediately began unloading the equipment. What's all this? Emma asked, her eyes wide with surprise. Snoop's grin widened. I remember there's a production store on this street. I was right. And they're helping us set up a stage for you? The crew worked quickly, efficiently, setting up speakers, microphones, even lights. Snoop explained his plan. If you're okay with it, he said, I'd like to set up a live stream while you sing. People can hear your story and donate. Emma's heart leapt. This is incredible. Thank you, she stammered, overwhelmed with gratitude. Snoop nodded, his expression turning serious for a moment. You've got real talent, Emma. And a cause that deserves support. Let's see if we can make something happen here. As the impromptu stage began to take shape, a small crowd began to gather, drawn by the unusual activity and the presence of a celebrity. Snoop's security team kept them at a respectful distance while the production crew finished the final adjustments. Okay, Snoop said, turning to Emma. Are you ready? Emma took a deep breath. Her heart raced as she glanced over at her van, where Leo was still sleeping peacefully. The crowd was larger than she was used to, and the equipment was far beyond anything she had ever dreamed of using. But as she looked out at the sea of faces, all watching expectantly, she felt a surge of hope. I'm ready, she said, her voice firm with newfound determination. Snoop nodded approvingly. All right then. Let's do this. He pulled out his phone and began setting up the live stream. As he did, he addressed the growing crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, his voice carrying easily over the street noise, we're about to witness something special. This is Emma, and she's got a voice that'll blow you away. But more importantly, she's got a story you need to hear. Emma stepped up to the microphone, feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement. The professional equipment made everything seem surreal, and the crowd was much larger than what she was used to. But as she looked out at the faces waiting, she felt ready to give it everything she had. Hello everyone, she began, her voice clear and strong. My name is Emma, and this is for my son Leo. With that, she began to sing. Her voice, now properly amplified by the professional setup, soared through the air, filling the street with emotion. The crowd fell silent, captivated by her performance. Between songs, Emma shared their story, the diagnosis, their struggles with medical bills, her daily fight to raise funds for Leo's treatment. Her words touched the hearts of many in the growing audience. She spoke about Leo's cancer, how it had affected their lives, and the pain of not being able to afford the treatment her son needed. As she spoke, she could see people in the crowd wiping away tears, reaching for their phones, or pulling out wallets to make donations. The donations began pouring in. Emma's old collection box couldn't keep up with the growing generosity. People were contributing online, calling their friends to spread the word, even sending money directly via digital platforms. Snoop, standing nearby, observed everything with satisfaction. His plan was working, and the kindness of strangers was becoming evident. But even more importantly, Emma's voice, her raw, honest talent, was touching lives. The live stream continued for hours, with Emma singing song after song, telling Leo's story, and inspiring others with her strength. Donations came flooding in from all over, some small, some generous. But each one was a symbol of hope, a sign that people cared. By the time the stream ended, Emma had raised enough money to cover her immediate medical expenses. But more importantly, she had made connections, touched lives, and shown the world the power of a mother's love for her child. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Emma sat next to Leo in the back of her van, tears streaming down her face. Snoop approached her, his expression filled with warmth. "You've got what it takes, Emma," he said sincerely. "And we're just getting started." Emma could only nod, overwhelmed by gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. Snoop placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've got a future ahead of you. Keep singing. Keep telling your story. And keep believing." And from that day forward, Emma's life changed in ways she could never have imagined. With the help of new supporters and the momentum from her viral performance, she continued to sing, sharing her story and raising funds for Leo's treatments. The journey ahead was still challenging, but she was no longer walking it alone. And as for Leo, he now had more hope than ever. A mother fighting for him, a community behind them, and the belief that miracles could happen. As the officer stepped back, Snoop turned to the crowd. "All right, everyone," he said with a big smile. "We've got to call it a night. Thank you all so much for your incredible support. Please keep Leo in your thoughts and prayers." The crowd started to move away, with many people stopping to drop their last donations into the overflowing collection box before they left. The production crew quickly began packing up the equipment, loading it into their van. Emma stood in the middle of it all, feeling overwhelmed by everything that had happened that day. Snoop walked over to her, his face calm and friendly. He smiled warmly. "You did amazing," he said. "How are you feeling?" Emma didn't know what to say at first. I don't even know," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "This is all just unbelievable. Thank you so much." Snoop's expression grew thoughtful. "Listen, it's getting late. In a few hours, how about I give you a ride home? We can talk more about what's next." Emma hesitated. "That's very kind of you, but I have my own car," she said, pointing toward her old van. Snoop followed her gaze, his brow furrowing slightly as he took in the condition of the van. "I understand," he said, "but if you don't mind, my security guard can drive your van while we follow. You and Leo can ride with me. I want to show you something." Emma thought for a moment. The events of the day had been so huge, and this extra offer of kindness almost seemed too much. But when she looked at Snoop's sincere face, she nodded. "Okay," she agreed. "But I'll need Leo's car seat." Snoop grinned. "No problem at all." The security team carefully transferred Leo's car seat to the back seat of Snoop's pink Cadillac. Emma gathered her things, hesitating for a moment before handing over her van keys to one of Snoop's guards. She felt a little nervous about leaving her only vehicle in the hands of a stranger. "Don't worry," Snoop reassured her, noticing her hesitation. "My team is completely trustworthy. Your van will be in good hands." Emma took a deep breath, feeling slightly relieved as she climbed into the passenger seat of Snoop's shiny Cadillac. She watched as Snoop gently picked up the still sleeping Leo and carefully secured him into the car seat. As Snoop got into the driver's seat and started the engine, he glanced back at Leo with a smile. Finally, a baby in the Cadillac. How cool is that? Emma couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of the situation. "It's definitely a first for us," she said. Snoop handed her his phone. "Take a look," he said. "I recorded the live stream." Emma scrolled through the video, her eyes widening as she saw the many supportive comments pouring in. People from all over were expressing their love, asking how they could help, and sharing their stories. The stark difference between her morning at the hospital and this moment left her almost speechless. I don't know what to say," she finally managed, handing the phone back to Snoop. Snoop nodded kindly. "It's a lot to take in, I know. But this is just the beginning, Emma. We're going to make sure Leo gets the care he needs." As they drove through the city streets, Snoop asked, "So, where do you live?" Emma hesitated, feeling a little shy. It's not in a great neighborhood," she said quietly. "Someone like you shouldn't be there." Snoop chuckled. "Someone like me?" he asked. "I grew up in poverty too. Trust me, there's not much I haven't seen." Seeing Emma's surprised expression, Snoop continued, his voice getting serious. "I sold candy, delivered newspapers, bagged groceries, just to survive. I know what it's like to struggle, to wonder where your next meal will come from." As Snoop spoke, he shared stories of his own childhood growing up in a rough neighborhood. His openness made Emma feel more at ease. "So," Snoop said gently, "I hope you'll welcome me into your home. No judgment, just support." Emma felt tears in her eyes, touched by Snoop's kindness. "Thank you," she whispered. "It means a lot to hear that." They drove on in silence for a while. Eventually, Snoop asked, "Would you like a tour?" Emma offered a small smile. "Sure," she said, trying to lighten the mood. I'd love one, Snoop replied. As they moved through her small house, the living room showed its age, worn furniture, peeling paint, and old water damage. I'm sorry it's not much, Emma said softly. Every penny we have goes to Leo's care and our basic needs. Snoop placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. You have nothing to apologize for. You're doing everything you can for your son, and that's what matters. With Leo now awake and toddling around, Emma showed Snoop the kitchen, where the sink hadn't worked in months. I do everything in the laundry sink now, she explained. It's not ideal, but we make it work. Snoop nodded, his brow furrowed. And repairs? Emma shook her head. I don't spend money fixing the house. Every cent goes to Leo's care or to basic things we need. At least it's clean enough that Leo doesn't get sick or hurt. They continued through the house, and Emma showed Snoop the bedroom she shared with Leo. It had just a single bed and a small cot for Leo. A chest of drawers, its paint chipped, stood against one wall. We make do, Emma said softly. It's not much, but it's home. Snoop stood in the doorway, his eyes soft as he took it all in. Emma, I've seen a lot in my life, but the love and care you have for your son, it's truly inspiring. Emma felt tears welling in her eyes at his words. Thank you, she managed. I just wish I could do more for him. Back in the living room, Leo was still quietly playing with his toys. Snoop watched him for a moment, then turned to Emma. I want to help you and Leo, he said. Not just with money, but in a way that could change your lives. Emma's heart began to race. What do you mean? Snoop took a deep breath. I run a private charity through my music label. We help people in need, especially kids with medical problems. I want to cover all of Leo's treatments. The surgery, the therapy, everything. Emma gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. But that's too much. The treatments are so expensive. I can't accept something like that. Snoop shook his head. It's not a handout, Emma. It's an investment in Leo's future, and in your talent. I heard you sing today. You have a gift. With the right support, you could have a real music career. Emma stood there, stunned into silence. Her mind raced with possibilities, but also with doubts. I don't know what to say, she finally managed. Snoop's expression softened. You don't have to decide right now. But Leo needs urgent care. While your music career could help cover it one day, it'll take time. Time Leo might not have. Let me help you give him the best chance. Emma looked down at Leo, who had now toddled over to her. She held him close. Are you sure? She asked quietly. Snoop nodded, his eyes full of determination. I'm sure. I've never been more sure of anything. Emma stood there, Leo in her arms, her mind racing with emotions. Hope, disbelief, gratitude, and a touch of fear about such a big change in their lives. Snoop, sensing her hesitation, spoke again, his voice gentle but filled with enthusiasm. Let's call Leo's doctor now. What's her name? Dr. Olivia, Emma replied automatically, still dazed by everything happening. All right then, Snoop said, his tone brightening. Let's call Dr. Olivia and let her know Leo will get the best treatment he deserves. Emma took out her phone, her hand trembling slightly. She couldn't help but marvel at how quickly everything had changed that day. Hello, St. Mary's Children's Hospital, came the receptionist's voice. Yes, hello, Emma said, her voice stronger than she expected. This is Emma Blake, Leo Blake's mother. I need to speak with Dr. Olivia Matthews urgently, please. There was a brief pause. One moment, Mrs. Taylor. I'll see if Dr. Carter is available. As they waited, Snoop gave Emma an encouraging nod. Leo, sensing the tension, looked up at his mother with curious eyes. Dr. Carter speaking, came the familiar voice after a few moments. Dr. Olivia, Emma said, her voice catching slightly. This is Emma Blake. I have some news about Leo's treatment. Oh, Mrs. Taylor, Dr. Carter's voice was filled with curiosity and concern. What happened? Emma took a deep breath, glancing at Snoop for reassurance. We can proceed with the full treatment plan, the surgery, the therapy, everything. We have the funds now. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. That's wonderful news, Mrs. Taylor, Dr. Carter said, her voice filled with genuine joy. May I ask what changed? Emma glanced at Snoop, then answered quietly, Actually, you don't have to explain everything right now. We'll talk at the hospital. Can you see us soon? Leo needs to be there immediately. Dr. Carter replied, Yes, of course, Mrs. Taylor. I'll alert the team and start preparing for immediate pre-surgery assessments. We'll be ready when you arrive. As Emma ended the call, Snoop was already moving toward the door. Let's go, he said. We'll take your van. Emma hesitated. Are you sure? Your car would probably be faster. Snoop shook his head with a smile. No, your van is perfect. Plus, I don't want to attract any public attention with my Cadillac. We're here to help, not make a press conference. Emma felt a wave of gratitude wash over her at Snoop's thoughtful gesture. She quickly gathered Leo's essentials, a change of clothes, his favorite toy, and his medical documents. Within minutes, they were out the door and heading to Emma's old, weathered van. As Emma secured Leo in his car seat, Snoop climbed into the passenger seat. The contrast between the famous rapper and her humble vehicle was stark, but Snoop seemed completely at ease. Emma started the engine, which sputtered to life after a couple of tries. She couldn't help but glance at Snoop. "Thank you for this," she said softly. "For everything." Snoop nodded, his expression serious. "You don't need to thank me, Emma. This is what it's all about, helping each other when we can." As they drove through the city streets, Snoop opened up about his own background. He shared stories of his childhood growing up in poverty, selling candy, delivering newspapers, and bagging groceries just to survive. His candid stories helped bridge the gap between their different worlds, making Emma feel more comfortable. "That's why I started my foundation," he explained. "I wanted to give back to help people who are in the same situation I once was." Emma listened closely, occasionally glancing in the rearview mirror at Leo, who was quietly playing with his toy in the back seat. The reality of what was happening, that they were on their way to life-saving treatment, was still sinking in. As they neared the hospital, Snoop's voice took on a more reflective tone. "You know, Emma, every act of kindness, no matter how small, can change a life. Today we're changing too." Emma felt tears in her eyes. "I just want him to have a chance," she said softly. Snoop nodded. "And now he will. But remember, this isn't just about Leo. You've got talent, Emma. Once Leo's on the road to recovery, we're going to work on your music career. This is a new beginning for both of you." As they pulled up to the hospital entrance, Emma felt a surge of hope unlike anything she'd experienced in months. She parked the van and turned to look at Leo, who was blissfully unaware of the huge moment they were in. "Ready?" Snoop asked gently. Emma nodded, taking a deep breath. "Ready?" They got out of the van, Emma carefully lifting Leo from his car seat. As they walked toward the hospital doors, Emma felt as though she was stepping into a new chapter of their lives. With Snoop by her side and Leo in her arms, she pushed open the hospital doors, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, with renewed hope and unexpected support. If you enjoyed this story, share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories. I'll see you in the next video.